So, good evening, everyone. I'm Hector Gunther, Chair of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee of the Town of Barnstable. This is the bi-weekly March 10th, 2025 of CFAC, so-called. We meet every other Monday throughout the year, except for July and August, when we only meet on one evening in those months. In accordance with Massachusetts law, is anyone taping this meeting? And if so, to make himself or herself known? Seeing none, I think we can go to the roll call. Chris Lauzon?
Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Here.
Lillian, not here. Jim,
Present.
Tom,
Present.
Jeremy,
Present.
Chris King,
I'm here.
and I am here, so we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Is there anyone from the public who wants to make comments before we get going on our agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 24th, 2025?
So moved.
Seconded.
Right. Any comments, corrections from members of the committee? Believe it or not, I read through the minutes like I usually do, and I found nothing. So Teresa, hats off to you for a great job. Do I have a motion to, or Chris, can you call the roll?
Yes. Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. All set.
Great. All right, moving on to item number 4, topics for discussion. The first one is presentation of the contents of the fiscal year 2026 capital budget and the fiscal 2026 to 2030 capital plan document. So Gareth, I think the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. As you all know, per our fiscal year 26 budget action calendar, the fiscal year FY26 capital budget was due to the town council on March 3rd. And that was submitted to them electronically via email and by posting of the budget book to the town's website. Physical copies of the book are at the publisher and will be available near the end of this week, if not early next week. The next step, April 3rd, Town Council will conduct the first readings on the projects, and then public hearings on April 17th and May 1st. And we'll throw in a budget presentation to capital budget presentation to the council at that point as well. Let me share my screen and we can just go through some of the highlights of the program for FY26. And everyone see the FY26 budget book?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this year we're coming in at 405 pages for the book. I think that's an increase of about 15 pages on last year. I said last year I'd try and make it smaller, but I didn't achieve that goal. So back to the drawing board, I think. Each year it's getting a little bit bigger. Again, we received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our FY25 budget, so we'd like to promote that each year. Budget books broken out into multiple sections. The first section being the improvement plan submissions. Throughout the process, this section or the submissions were fine-tuned as we departments sometimes pulled back projects that they felt weren't ready. But ultimately, we were right around $770 million for all funds through FY26 through 30. You can see just shy of $126 million in enterprise funds, 312 million in general fund projects, and 332 million in CWMP projects. Looking at specific projects for fiscal year 26 as proposed, and these again aren't moving forward in their entirety. These are actual submissions, but for 26, the Barnstable Municipal Airport had one project at just shy of $1 million. One project for the marinas. HYCC, we saw 4 projects. Of courses had 2 projects, and then 2 projects proposed for the water pollution control facilities. 2 projects at the water supply, and then actually 3 projects at the solid waste. But in actual fact, I'm just noticing here that the 3rd place truck replacement project was actually bumped out to FY27. CWMP, 66 million in projects proposed for FY26, and I believe we're funding all of those. A few submissions for administrative services, mainly in the IT area, or most entirely in the IT area, sorry. Projects at the police department, marinas, community services, obviously DPW housing the majority of the projects for the municipality, and then on to the school department. We had our review process, similar but different to previous years. We did away this year with one of the scoring at the task force hearing. We decided to give the opportunity for the department heads to kind of hear more of the projects as opposed to the scoring round. So we had just one scoring round based on the town council strategic plan. They rated each project based on the 7 criteria with a score from 0 to 4, based on public health and safety, education, economic development, kind of infrastructure protection, environment and natural resources, quality of life financing, and then the impact on the operating budget. Additionally, planning, how the projects relate to outside planning and existing plans, and then usage and demand. Scores were averaged. You can see the breakout of the scores. Typically, we see the public roads program scoring very highly, and that was again evident this year. Barnstable United HVAC issues obviously scored very highly, and I think that's attributed to all of the issues going on there with the indoor air quality. And then a new one this year was 3rd place was the JFK Memorial, which we've seen on the capital plan for a number of years, but never has scored that high. So that was an interesting find this year. We in part 3 of the budget book,
I'm sorry, Gareth, on the JFK Memorial, what would have caused it to score so differently?
Well, I think I really don't know. I think in part it's possibly the fact that it has been on our list for so long, and it has not seen much traction. So I think it's gradually worked its way up in the priority. Not much has changed from last year in that project. So it's interesting to see. Interesting to see. I certainly couldn't say exactly why the scoring or why it was valued higher this year.
Can
Well,
we
the
take a
need
quick look
wasn't
at the
any,
project?
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Can we take a quick look at the write-up? It might have an indication for Tom.
Yeah, we can certainly pull it up if you'd like.
But Gareth, to your knowledge, that the need at the JFK Memorial was no more dire this year than prior years.
I suspect the only thing that's changed is probably the cost, and I'd say it's only gone up. So,
But the urgency to do the work.
same. It really,
Oh,
PPW 32.
I don't want to delay the entire meeting, Gareth. Why don't just if you can send it later, that'd be fine. Just out of curiosity.
Certainly. So part three, we take a look at the status of existing projects. So we look for opportunities to perhaps reallocate existing funds to new projects, if projects are finished or perhaps the scope has changed. So you can see on this table the items highlighted from previous years in yellow. On the right-hand side, you'll see where the funds are being reallocated to. One of the larger, a couple of items were from the school department. They had approved last year 3.3 million in unit ventilator replacements. I believe that was at the middle school or the high school, middle school, I think. And 650,000 in RTU replacements at Barnstable United. Those are being repurposed to similar air quality projects in the school department. But I think the new facilities director coming in wasn't satisfied with the scopes of those existing projects, so decided to return the funds and relook at it. Obviously, we look at our 5-year funding capacity, which is kind of a large consideration when we look at the availability of funds for next year. We include the CWMP cash flow analysis, which you all should be familiar with at this point. Most of this is derived from the funding tool that was put together and reviewed last month.
right, Gareth, if I could just stop you there. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about the intended use draft proposal later, but we would need to modify some of these variables if that intended use plan becomes final.
Yeah, a lot of these assumptions they already factored in the kind of 50 million yearly total for each year.
Yeah,
I think you'll find that kind of the longer term
yeah,
assumptions will need to be reassessed based on potential draft
right.
findings.
Okay, but some of these variables will need to be modified if the plan goes through as drafted.
Correct. And then we have our capital trust fund cash fund analysis, flow analysis, similar to the CWMP. And we have that through 2035. We look at our debt position. We list all of the borrowings we have in place through June 30th, about 165 million.
Do we show in here what is the amount of debt amortization in fiscal 2025 and forecast for 2026? Where would those numbers be?
We actually have the entire, well, we have,
I'm looking for the totals, not the individual.
if it's not in this section, we have the totals for 25 and 26 in the Appendix A of this book, which will show
Okay,
debt for both enterprise, general fund, and CWMP going up
right.
when they expire, totaled by year. So yeah, it's included.
Okay,
Then we get into the town manager recommendations. So these are the projects at this point that he is moving forward. It's the enterprise fund totals. One project at the airport, fairgrounds, the marina, HYCC, 2 for water supply, and 2 for water pollution control. General fund projects are totaling 25 million. We'll look at about 6 million from reserves and be issuing bonds of just over 18 million. The remaining 1.1 in the other category is from the total of projects that we have reauthorized for the current year's plan. And then the CWMP, we're looking at borrowing 61.6 million. The 2 projects listed here, the Centerville Village South Phase and the Finney's Lane neighborhoods, are the 2 projects that were included in the FY25 draft intended use plan. And then the remaining projects are funded from the CWMP Reserve Fund. This is mainly design and permitting work that we couldn't borrow for from the state. So we typically fund from cash, totaling about 4.4 million. Total proposed projects, just over $100 million, so a little less than last year, but still quite a sizable capital plan as proposed. Additionally, we've included a handful of projects that were in the submissions, but are outside of the capital plan's funding structure. Majority of them where we'll be looking for appropriations from the Community Preservation Fund during FY26. One of them will be from the Kirkman Fund for the cemetery, and then 1 million of the public roads maintenance project will actually be funded from the state Chapter 90 fund, which isn't subject to town council appropriation, but is included as part of the approximately 3.9 million in road maintenance proposed for next year. Then we just go individually through each project as proposed for the town manager's proposed projects. After the recommended project detail, we have the detailed descriptions of the deferred projects, which probably takes up the majority of the book. So that's any project that was not approved for FY26 and any other projects that were planned through 27 through FY30. Then we close the book with the appropriation orders and the debt amortization schedules in Appendix B. Sorry, I said A earlier, Appendix B. And council orders will give you some idea of where the projects are being funded from, whether it's reserves or an appropriation for or approval of a bond issue or the reallocation of funds from an existing project. And that's largely the book.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Gareth. Much appreciated. This is on the town website, correct?
Yep, it's on the homepage, the town manager's page, and the
Okay.
finance department's page.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All
If
right.
any members would like a copy of the budget book, let me know. I did include, I think about 5 or 6 copies, I think, for the group. Don't feel like you need to take one. The books are getting expensive, so we're trying to reduce the number we actually physically print. But again, they'll be there if you prefer that way of reviewing the book.
They're at your office.
There will be by next week.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if no further questions, why don't we move on to 4B, which is the update on the fiscal year 2026 general fund revenue and fixed costs projections. So Gareth, back over to you.
Yep. That's 1 minute. I'll pull it up.
All right.
Now, this was included in your packet for tonight, correct? Everyone got a copy of it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you would have received an earlier version of this, I believe, probably prior to the holidays, when we did our initial projections for FY26. Typically around the time where we go through the 60-40 revenue sharing agreement with the town manager and school superintendent. So just as a bit of background, the budget cycle is very fluid. As we go through and get additional information from outside organizations, state budget process develops, as things like health insurance rates get set. And as we get further through the existing fiscal year and we can start to kind of do better projections on where we feel revenues might fall the current fiscal year, we can start making firmer assumptions on what next fiscal year might be. So this is kind of the summary of the first round of updates we've made to our FY26 budget projection at this point. We're starting to run out of milestones that will impact the projection at this point. So it's a pretty solid it's a pretty solid number to work with at this point. And if anything, we try to preserve the projections from the initial round to be the final projection, just so that there's some stability for both the finance department that are putting the budget together, the school department that's going through their budget process. So again,
Gareth, I do have a couple of questions. So
Sure.
if I look at other taxes, a motor vehicle excise goes up by 15.4%. Is there any, what would explain that outsized increase?
So initially, we were projecting, well, last year we had a budget of 8.4 million. You can look at FY20, our original FY25 budget projection was 8.4 million. If you look at FY24's actuals, you can see 9.8 million was actually collected.
Right,
And you can see that kind of trend of it being right around or over $9 million each year. So we have always tried to conservatively estimate that receipt, just because
right.
it is a variable category that could dip with the economy.
Mhm.
But for the purposes of FY26, we're not seeing that right now. The second commitment for FY25 is supporting the fact that it will be right around the 9.4, 9.5, I think, at least. Sorry, it was going to be about 9.9, I think. So we were looking, we didn't want to exceed that. So we're looking at about
Right.
9.7 for FY26 at this
So the
point.
percentage change is budget prior year versus budget or projection for this year.
Yeah.
It's
And
not versus, because I notice if you compare actual for fiscal 2024 budget,
we're still behind. We're still projecting or budgeting an amount less than we took in FY24.
yeah,
But again, I think there's FY26 is still being a little conservative.
okay,
But again, it's a variable receipt, so you never quite know exactly, and you don't have much control over it. But if you look at the market, the cars are so expensive right now. The value that we're assessing on to start with is higher than they've ever been. And sales are still tracking relatively high for new vehicles. So yeah,
right.
fiscal year 26 will be fine, but we'll monitor that for future years. Who knows what tariffs are going to do to us? Property taxes, sorry, back to the top there. Nothing changed on the base tax assessment based on that just being a rollover from the base from FY25. We have our allowable increase of 3.7 million. We are budgeting new growth at just over $1.2 million for 26. FY25 is right around 1.7. We believe we'll meet that 1.2 and probably exceed it, but we don't want to go much higher than that at this point. Remaining groups there, environmental tax, debt exclusions are kind of out of our control. Overlay reserve. The debt exclusion is obviously for the regional tech school in Harwich, and we've received the that amount there. So that's what's moving forward at this point.
Gareth,
yes.
Chris King. This is my first time through a lot of this data, and just a real general question that I don't understand or don't know where it's captured, but the taxes that we're showing here are for individual homes, and I would assume apartment buildings that have tax assessed to it. What about business tax and company companies that are operating in Barnstable, are there taxes that are levied against them that would show up on a form, maybe not this one, but a different one?
Yeah, so this is a very summarized it's a summary of our tax collections. So you're right. Base taxes would include residential, commercial, and personal property. So that baseline there represents those three categories.
Yeah.
We can certainly break that out for the group, and it is included in a larger format in our operating budget book when it's published later on.
Okay. Just a general observation then is that I would have thought that the tax would have been higher because, Barnstable does have a sizable amount of commercial businesses and businesses that are operate in Barnstable. And I just off the top of my head, I was just thinking that it could have been higher. But if it's not, it's not.
If it's not, it's not.
Right.
I would certainly like it to be higher. It would make our job a little easier, but no, that's the base property values and taxes associated with those categories.
Okay, thank you.
Gareth, is there a reason why the property taxes for the earlier years, 2020 to 2024, aren't in on this document?
It's because it's when you start to get nuanced into the tax collections, you start running into the tax years crossing years with tax title and things like that. It's always changing, so we don't typically include it in there, but we can certainly have that information for everyone.
I think it'd be interesting to see how that baseline for property taxes grew over time. I mean, you have to have those data somewhere. Yes, you probably have some classification issues, but
yeah, it starts to lose its usefulness if, for an example, in FY22 you had a taxpayer that paid off an additional $800,000 in tax title from prior years.
right.
It can get kind of nuanced.
Yeah.
So maybe if we just included the prior year budgeted amounts, I think would probably be helpful as well.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Not a big deal, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't mean to push the point, Gareth, but it would be nice to be able to see the splits of the different tax revenue that comes in, because from a single family home tax, Barnstable is relatively economical. It's not a very high tax area as compared to other areas. We've seen a document that kind of shows that none of us want to live in Weston anymore because of the amount of taxes that they but
But Barnstable traditionally has a very low tax rate compared to other communities.
A very low tax rate. And how does that compare from a commercial, and how does that compare with a business tax? And to show those, if there is a need to increase tax, is it something that can be done economically across all three tax, or as all the various tax inputs? That's all.
Again, that information is typically published in our annual operating budget document.
Okay.
But
so I will see
purely
that.
a presentation to the CFAC group.
Okay.
From our internal numbers, so it's not traditionally something that we publish to the community.
Okay, that's perfect. I just was just diving in and asking little questions. So thank you.
Just a clarifying question for me, Gareth. The term business taxes, what does that mean? Is that the CIP?
So you'll be looking at like your commercial real estate and industrial real estate,
So okay, so
plus your,
commercial industrial.
assessments on personal property, which would be
Right. So,
housed in.
so we do property taxes on commercial, but there aren't separate business taxes except for the rooms tax, right?
You would be right, except for any kind of charges for service or business licenses, those types of things. But
Right, but those are fees.
not a business property tax per se that you might see in other states, like
Right.
a
And,
local option.
and we do not have a local option on the sales tax, right?
No.
Right. Is that available to us?
For what you wish for. In some form or fashion, there are roundabout ways of local option taxes, and you might see more coming down through the municipal modernization acts. But no, we certainly haven't adopted anything yet.
Okay, thank you.
Hector, I see Betty has her hand up.
Oh, Betty, please. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm trying to, here I am. I'm coming out of mute land. The video doesn't seem to want, there we go. No, I wanted to say that I love the discussion. I love the new voices. It has to do with that split tax with the commercial rate. And for those who are new, it was the citizens that brought, it has to do with the residential exemption. There's only so many levers you can pull in this town to manipulate the taxes. And it was the citizens who brought forward the residential exemption. You guys were talking about how cheap it is. Well, not so cheap if you live in Osterville or Hyannisport or things like that, where you're paying $50,000 a year in taxes. So not so cheap for those folks. But that's because these are second homes. But when the citizens brought forward the petition that went to the voters, they voted overwhelmingly for the residential exemption and also for the split tax rate that would tax the businesses. And that's something that I would love you guys to look at in more depth. We look at it, what is it, every December, where we vote on the residential exemption and the split tax rate. It would be nice to have a little more analysis on that. We always just brush it off. Oh, we don't have enough businesses. They can't do that. So they can't. But when the citizens came forward years ago, we did have that rate. And then the Chamber of Commerce came in and took it away. So I would love the analysis then. I just love the discussion. That's it. When you bring new voices in, you bring fresh perspectives to things, and it's really nice. That's it.
I thought we did have a split rate. Is that not the case, Gareth?
Is the residential and the business rate the same, even though it is two different ones? I believe that might be true.
The rate per thousand that you're talking about?
Yeah. I think that's what that means.
I thought there was a split rate. I thought there was a differential on the tax per thousand between commercial and residential. Betty, when was the residential exemption referendum? When did that pass? Do you recall what year it was?
You know, I can't be certain, Hector. I'm guessing 2007-ish, because
Okay.
it was a long time that and then, we just recently raised the residential exemption. It just stuck there for all those years. I want to say 2007, but again, also was a split tax. And for that very beginning, the voters overwhelmingly wanted the commercial rate to go up. And then it was brought down. So again, I'm saying other than I love the fresh thinking and the fresh people here on your committee. And I love the discussion. I think it's good. And I do feel sad at the beginning of the presentation where we said this entire thing is based on the town council strategy, which is a really not a good document. And we're really trying to work that strategy. So it's kind of sad that it's based on that. But anyways,
Yeah. Thank you. And Gareth, do you happen to know what is the level of the Vineyard Wind property tax receipts for fiscal 2025? And what are they projected to be for fiscal 2026? And if you don't know, you could come back to us with that information.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that we've had this discussion earlier this year because they did become one of the larger taxpayers this fiscal year. So I'll
Right.
certainly get to that number.
Yeah, I'd be curious, and their personal property tax is based on the infrastructure that's installed under the beach and under the roadways, and includes the substation. That infrastructure is there, and so the assessment is what it is. But I'm curious to know, are there
Yes,
any
that falls under the personal property.
right personal property? But since the construction of the project has been significantly delayed, I don't think that would affect the personal property taxes that the project pays.
No, the infrastructure is already there.
Yeah,
So while it's there, it gets taxed.
yeah, and they are paying, of course, the annual fee as well.
Yes,
It's
any mitigation. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I think you can see now the FY25 tax rates. So 694 residential and 610 for commercial industrial.
Oh, it's lower for the commercial and industrial.
I think the 694 is a higher rate due to the residential exemption, but I'd have to go back and check how the entire calculation works again.
Yeah, okay.
All right, the stop that.
Just looking at the historical trends, there's only 1 year since there was a split rate that the commercial was higher, and that was the first year ever since residential has been higher. So that might be going off of that exemption, but there's only
Right.
2006.
The residential rate may be the nominal rate, and then a lot of people get the year-round residents get a lower rate because of the exemption.
Yeah.
So then moving on to state aid, we obviously, I think I'd mentioned at a previous meeting that we'd received our FY26 governor's budget cherry sheet. So that is the list of receipts and expenses for the town of Barnstable that the state will assess or distribute. Minimal changes in veterans benefits or exemptions. Looking at approximately 392,000 in Chapter 70 aid increase. Our charter tuition reimbursements, we have significantly decreased that estimate from our prior estimate down to 1.5 million. Just so you know that when a student attends a Commonwealth charter school, be it either the Sturgis campuses, Rising Tide, or the one up in Harwich, I forget that's name. The town gets reimbursed. Well, we get assessed tuition for those students going to that school in our Chapter 70 calculation, but we also get reimbursed from the state. I believe it's on it was like a 90, 60, 30 reimbursement based on the initial year they student leaves. We get 90% of the tuition. Year 2, 60, year 3, 30% of the tuition back, and then we absorb the entire cost going forward. So that reimbursement can change based on the students moving through the district, how long they've been in the district or out of district, and also it's subject to appropriation by the state, and They have been known to change the reimbursement formula any given year based on what they can afford. But at this point, we're looking at a $1.5 million reimbursement. Unrestricted government aid has a minimal increase. So overall, total state aid, about a $70,000 change from our initial estimates. Charges for service, no major changes. Charges to services proposed or changes from our original estimates. Fees, relatively the same, no major changes from our initial projection. Fines and penalties, we have seen more aggressive tax lien collections in the recent years. So we have upped that budget by $760,000 in FY26 as the treasurer maintains that collection process. We've actually working with outside attorneys to help facilitate the collection of these past due accounts, and we've seen quite a bit of success. Hand up there again.
Yeah, just curious, how much are we spending on those outside attorneys?
Not certain on the top of my head. I can certainly get that information.
Yeah, no, I just when I went up to Boston to that Mass Municipal Association, the outside attorney we've hired, Brown and somebody, was up there, had a nice chat with them. They seemed very competent, and I think it's good that we're doing this because I heard about one that this particular individual owes us almost $1 million. So it is well worth it to get this outside counsel to get that money. That's it.
Yep, no, it's certainly paying dividends as far as the return we've seen on that investment.
But they're probably compensated as a percentage of what they collect.
We might have that arrangement. I would have to double check.
Yeah, yeah.
No major changes in charges for service or fees. And fines and penalties, again, tax title collections there. Large category here in other revenue, we're looking at our earnings on investment. Budgeted in FY25, 1.9 million. We initially budgeted 3.5 for FY26. We've upped that a little bit to 3.7, so a total increase, excuse me, of 1.8 million on the existing budget. If you look at our FY24 returns, just over 4.1 million. So still a little shy of FY24 estimate or actuals, but we're confident that we can get there.
Now, have you increased it based on an interest rate assumption or on having more cash to invest?
More along the lines of how we don't assume any major changes in cash flow at this point for FY26. So we'll have a similar level to FY24 and 25. And as we look at the actuals for 24 and 25, we had to increase the projected budget. It was we were budgeting at 1.9 million, and we'll exceed that $4 million mark easily in FY25. So we had to up the projection for 26.
Right, but I guess I'm asking, what is the interest rate assumption behind the earnings on investment? Have you assumed flat interest rates?
Yeah, largely consistent with what returns we were seeing this year,
Okay,
which I don't know off the top of my head.
yep, okay. Renewable energy revenue, is that from solar?
That's correct. So that would include the power plants out at the airport, so and the solid waste facilities and any smaller projects that we have within the district, within the town.
But why would it go down? Why would that assumption go down if from the 2024 actual of 1,868,000 to the updated fiscal 2026 budget of 1,224,000? That's quite a drop. What's the cause of
The
that?
original estimate for FY26 was 1.8. We've lowered it to 1.2.
Right,
We get a little nervous in this category just because we can't predict the weather.
right,
Additionally, things like if there's a mechanical failure at one of these solar plants,
right.
and it's offline for any period of time and it's not generating, then we're going to see
Mhm.
budget impacts there. So we've dipped that down a little bit just to be a little more conservative, purely because it's one of those categories that we don't have a lot of control over.
Makes sense.
So Gareth, am I wrong to assume that um, the solar plants are the money that is generated from the solar plants is consumed by the enterprise fund that the solar plant is on? Like the airport consumes all of the funds that are generated?
I'm not completely certain on the mechanism for where the electricity actually goes. I think it's all fed into the grid, and we get payback based on the net watts that we feed into the grid. Um, Certainly, the enterprise fund gets a portion of that revenue, both at the solid waste and the airport, but the majority of it is a general fund receipt.
Okay. Yeah, I thought otherwise, but I could be, I mean, again, I'm still learning, so that's good input.
Chris, I'm still learning too, and I've been on the committee for 8 years. Back up a little bit, Chris, or excuse me, Gareth. Other revenue, Medicaid reimbursement, 171,000 in 2024, and we're assuming 400,000 in 2026, an increase from the earlier budgeted number of 170. So Medicaid reimbursement, that comes via the state, correct?
No, well, sorry,
Well,
Medicaid reimbursement.
where I'm headed with the question is there's a lot of talk at the federal level of cutting Medicaid. I saw Speaker Johnson on CNN last week saying that they were going to find 880 billion of savings, a lot of it from Medicaid. So I'm wondering why and again, if you don't know the answer, we can revisit this, but we originally had a 170,000 budgeted for 2026, and all of a sudden it's 400,000. And I'm just curious why that change.
So essentially, the Medicaid reimbursement is for somewhat health-related activities in the school department that are eligible for reimbursement from the Medicaid plan. So, as an example, a student on a individualized education plan might require nursing services throughout the day um, in order to be able to successfully function in the school system. That nurse's time can be reimbursed from the Medicaid plan, which essentially flows through the state, but is a federal program. The state just administers it.
Right.
If you take a look back on the actuals for Medicaid reimbursement from FY 20, 21, and 22,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can see the reimbursement rates were around 300,000, 600,000, and 400,000.
Mhm.
And then it dipped off in FY 24 down to 171,000. That was twofold. One, there was some tinkering with what was an eligible expense. So at the administrative level, certain services were no longer available for reimbursement or were being reimbursed at a lower rate, or there was actually a new threshold of documentation required.
Okay.
The other part of this equation was the school system not doing a terrific job in seeking out those reimbursements or documenting them. Working with the superintendent, we've been reassured that they've put in place new procedures, new staff to seek the maximum reimbursement amounts from Medicaid. So we have adjusted our budget upwards to be more in line with prior year actuals. But throwing in the federal conundrum, where it will actually end is we're starting to get into kind of crystal ball areas, to be perfectly honest.
Okay,
But
that
we're
gives
hopeful that's how we can get that revenue line back up. But a lot of it is dependent on activities at the school level.
the school has to document anything they want to collect on. Got it.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
No significant changes in permits proposed at this point. Our building permits are budgeted about $200,000 more than FY 25. That's more in line with the actuals that we've seen recently. And then no major changes in special assessments.
And I see the hot tub permit is level at $900.
Yeah, not the biggest earner, no.
Tanning is flat at 200. Okay.
Transfers are largely you've got our transfers to the enterprise fund. So that's to cover some of the costs related to operating the HYCC. We have our transfers to our pension trust fund. Those transfers in from the pension trust fund, and we have our transfers from the enterprise funds for the assessment that the general fund has for services provided to those enterprise funds. For example, IT support, accounting support, executive and legislative support. We assess the enterprise a chargeback, and that's the estimate in the revenue for 26 of about 4.1 million.
Okay. Gareth, I'm mindful of time here. I know
Okay.
Jim Sproul needs to jump off at 7:15. Is that right, Jim? And I thought so if anyone has any other questions about this, the budget projections, please speak up. Otherwise, I think we ought to move on.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I went and checked, and in fact, we do not have a separate CIP rate. And the reason we do not is that 90% of the property value in the town is residential. And so you do not get much value. You can double the taxes on a business and like drop by $200 maybe the taxes on a typical home.
Yeah.
So we do not do a separate CIP. We do the residential exemption, which is just within the residential class.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Tom. Very, very helpful. Gareth, can you just give us for item 4C a sort of summary of anything over and above what Mark Ells has said publicly about the draft intended use plan. It's my understanding that the state and the DEP are getting a lot of pushback from municipalities about the proposed changes. Is there any update in terms of what's coming out of Boston about this draft?
Yeah, so I guess everyone has seen the draft, and just to kind of summarize it, the major change in the way they're operating from prior years is essentially limiting the follow-on years fundings for approved projects. So, as an example, if we were to have $100 million project and we sought the $50 million cap reimbursement in the first year, we would not be allowed to go back and seek the additional 50 million for the remainder of the project in the following fiscal year. So essentially, they're just changing the rules as we go along and moving the goalposts a little bit. But I guess it's an attempt to make sure that they can fund and have a fund to fuel future projects. But I have not heard or been made aware of any additional information at this point,
Yeah,
outside of what you would have heard at the
Yeah.
town manager communications.
yeah. By the way, I much appreciated the fact that you or someone shaded the relevant sections of this report. It was helpful to be able to scroll through it and find them.
Yeah,
And it's
essentially it's that third line there where it says and provide no carryover costs for new projects in subsequent years.
yeah,
And that's just a game changer. It's amazing how
Yeah.
half a dozen words there can change the scope of a lot of projects.
So I have a Gareth, Jim Sproul, I have a question on, does that impact anything that we are doing for our current CWMP?
So the existing projects that are approved and in the funding stage, that rule won't apply. It's only new projects in FY 25's plan, which are the Centerville's South Phase and the Finney's Lane project that would be subject to the new rules going forward. It's my understanding that the prior approved projects will still fall with the ability to carry over costs, but again, that could change too, and could be our interpretation. But no, the understanding is existing plans in the project would not be subject to that new interpretation.
Well, the Centerville, as you know, is a big project for this upcoming year, so.
The proposed one that was listed in the draft is 44 million, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Centerville was 15 million and the Finney's Lane was 45.
okay. Is there any way that a layman can boil that down into usable information? Will we know what how severe that impact would be on the CWMP?
I think the most useful tool might be when Mark revises the CWMP financing tool,
Right.
because he'll have to, at the moment it's broken out into the $50 million chunks each year that would be subject to the cap in the state for the state revolving fund. If we get to a point where we can't list the carry-on years, then that $50 million threshold would have to be brought down. So using that tool, I think you might be more clearly able to see the implications of at least the 5 years impacts on the CWMP cash plan. So that would be where I would go first, and
Okay.
I believe Mark is working in that direction.
Thank you.
great.
Essentially, you
Anything
have
else?
to add another variable to the equation, to the cash flow.
Yeah. Um, So, Gareth, do you know when this draft is supposed to be finalized, or is that even that's not clear?
I'm not clear on that yet.
Okay. Okay. Um, Jim, while we have you here, do you want to update the full committee on where the CIP subcommittee is, the considerable progress that Chuck, you and Jeremy have made?
Be happy to. We're at the present time, we have completed and submitted for your a review through the shared drive, our
Right.
draft plan. So that's up and available for anyone who wants to take a look at it. We've covered a lot of the topics that were discussed here this evening are already on there. What I'd like to point out is through our conversation, which were led by Jeremy, we are focusing in a number of our comments on the school's capital facilities needs. And certainly I would like for our committee members to take a look at that. We are quite concerned about the discussions, just concern, not an opinion, but a concern about the new voices regarding a school and what the implications of a new school would be within the community, as well as the need for significant capital for maintenance and the school facilities. Those two are major projects, and we have looked at not only the capital needs for a new school and raised some comments on that, but also discussed in committee and subcommittee, what we really can do if, for example, there was not the support for a new school. Would we even be able to bring forward the almost $90 million of school repairs? Would we have the staff? Do we have the personnel? Can we do the projects? There's a whole range of discussion that we have within the report, and certainly would love to have all other committee members to take a look at that. And if you have any comments or ideas or suggestions, please feel free to open up the document, put it in review mode, select edit, and incorporate your comments and concerns or questions in there, and we'll review them. But again,
Jim, I know that you've circulated a version 2 of the draft to Mark
Right.
and Gareth today.
right.
So that's probably the most current one. That's certainly the one that I'm looking at in preparation for tomorrow's subcommittee meeting. Has that been circulated to others on CFAC? And would it make sense if you did
Just
that?
the subcommittee, and I'm making that announcement now. I'm asking for all of us to review through the shared drive, the document.
Okay, but it's version 2. Well, I'm not sure if there were many changes from version 1, which was dated several days ago.
So that's the latest one. So the nomenclature, just for everyone's, is that we are using the title is the draft, and then if you are going to file a new document with your comments or edits, then just use an appropriate date and a new version number. So if
Okay.
somebody were to make a comment tomorrow, it would be 031125 version 3, for example. And that becomes the latest working document. You take the old one, the version 2, and move it into old versions. And that's the approach we've been taking.
Okay, so you're inviting non-CIP
Correct.
folks to take a look.
Correct. This is
All
our
right.
draft submission to CFAC.
Right, great. Okay, and we'll certainly talk about that tomorrow night
Which puts us
as a
on
sub.
schedule And then we have 2 meetings after tomorrow night, Hector, to
Right.
make final comments. We'll submit on that second meeting to the complete team. And then on the 7th, I think, of April,
Right.
we make our final submission with approval.
Excellent, excellent. And meantime, I know Chuck had a number of questions about some of the numbers, the various
Right.
exhibits. So
Right.
hopefully Mark and Gareth will be able to
Right.
get those to foot.
So those have been submitted to, we've asked Mark, Gareth, and Chris Dooley to take a look at those, all our numbers, and validate them. There's some of them are rounding errors, some of them are just, we've got numbers that aren't matching up. So hopefully a new set of eyes will be helpful for us.
Excellent.
I would
Okay.
suggest, sorry, I would suggest, James, if you can, to set a cutoff date for those that are outside of the subcommittee to look at the draft and make comments so that you're not getting comments at the end of the day.
Okay, that's fair enough. Then that date would be March 18th. That's the cutoff.
Okay.
All right. We've got our marching orders here. Great.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how are you enjoying working on the CIP process? This is your first time through.
It is. I would say I quite honestly took a day off from school when I was first wrapping my head around the numbers, and I just sat
Yeah.
for about 6 hours and went through everything from previous years, from different reports, and just getting a sense of what is necessary. I think it's also incredibly helpful having Betty on these meetings. I think that really helped us direct, especially those, we're trying to help town council, and town council
Yeah.
has some legitimate questions and wants some help when it comes to the schools. So
Yeah.
that's been really helpful. And I mean, like, Chuck is such a great report writer, and Jim's been such a great leader. So it has been a wonderful learning experience for me, and hopefully whatever I have contributed has been mildly useful.
All right. Great. All right. Well, thanks for that, Jim and Jeremy and Chuck too. All right. Any other communications from the staff? Gareth, anything else you or Mark have to report to us?
Nothing really significant. Minor change to the budget action calendar as we made an adjustment to the final date for approval for the budget from I think it was June 19th to the 26th, I think was the last day to approve the budget, but we had to move it because there was a change in town council meeting date. So it actually means we submit the budget 1 week later than we had scheduled because there's a 45-day adoption window. So we had to bump that out so that we could be within that window. But we're moving
Right.
from the capital budget to the operating budget.
Right. And speaking of the operating budget, have the folks on the operating budget subcommittee, have you, I'm not aware that you've had a meeting or that you've scheduled a meeting. What is the status of that? Does anybody know?
There is a schedule, and we haven't had a meeting yet. I think the first one is either next week or the week after. I'd have to look at the
Okay.
calendar.
Okay. Right. All right. I don't have anything as chair to report except to convey. So I'm also on the board of the Osterville Village Association, and we had a meeting last week, and there was a fair bit of discussion about, and which has been touched on in CFAC, about what any of the changes and budget machinations that are going on in Washington. There's some concern that eventually those changes will find their way down to the state level, and then to the regional level, and then to the municipality level. So I just report that. I think Mark said in our last meeting that he was on the edge of his seat waiting for any news of any impacts. But so far there have been none. But there was, among the board of the OVA, there was a little bit concerned that there are changes coming. So it's something we should all be alert to. I don't know, Tom, you go to Washington a fair bit. You don't have any insights into the
I
trickle-down
have no
effects.
insights into what seems to be a deliberate attempt to provoke a recession.
Yeah. Bloomberg LP had they had a lead story today on their website. Why is the president doing this? And they were just extensive speculation. Why? And they couldn't answer the question. So other than sort of a generalized, goal of cutting federal spending, but it doesn't seem to be a very systematic process by any means. So, any other comments, questions?
Just when it comes to schools, I will say as a teacher, we did have a number of pink slips distributed this week to teachers at Barnstable High School, and I know other schools in the district. So there are some proposed layoffs that are in the works, and it certainly has caused a lot of anxiety amongst teachers, and I know that is happening amongst families as well. So it was a pretty long school committee meeting this past week, but I imagine the operating budget folks will be touching on that. But I would share that it is certainly impactful as one who is a colleague of some of these folks that are seeing some of these cuts. So,
Jeremy, were these a surprise? Or was it a surprise the district was going to be laying people off?
I would say it's not a surprise. We've been hearing rumblings of it from the principal since maybe late fall. We didn't know exactly who, and certainly the superintendent presented the list of reductions at that school committee meeting. So we were in the dark of what departments would be targeted and what staff would be. So that's what happened this past week on Wednesday was notifications went out to staff who were notified that their positions were being taken.
Wow, that's sorry to hear that. If any of us wanted to get more details, we could look at the video of the most recent school committee.
Yeah, I don't know if it was sent out to everyone, but it's a very long meeting. I believe the superintendent gets on at 2 hours and 30 minutes, if anyone is curious, and she does lay down and kind of details all of the proposed changes. So that would definitely be worthy of watching. I've watched it twice now.
Okay.
Hector, I can forward you her PowerPoint presentation to the group if that would be helpful to the group.
Sure. That would be great. Thanks, Gareth. All right, Chuck, you've maintained a dignified silence. Any parting words of wisdom from where are you? Monterey Peninsula?
Yeah, no words of wisdom, but I think the subcommittee report is right on schedule, and Jeremy's self-deprecating stuff aside, I think the sections and the comments are particularly helpful this year. So I'm happy to have been part of this, and I think it's gone well. So other than that, no.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to listening in on your subcommittee meeting tomorrow night, and I will have been through the draft version too in detail by then. So, all right. Well, unless Chris Lauzon or Chris King have any parting shots, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So
move.
Second.
Great. Chris Lauzon, can you call the roll, please?
Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Jim. Jim is
Jim,
gone.
Jim left. Yep.
Tom,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Great. Well, thank you all for a good meeting, and we'll see most of you in 2 weeks, and Chuck and Jeremy, I'll see you tomorrow night.